The mines of Velith 9 never stopped. Day and night meant nothing underground. The Vellani workers moved through the dark tunnels like ghosts, their gray skin covered in dust, their forearms working without rest. They had been doing this for 847 years. Elder Boza remembered the stories her grandmother told her. Stories of a time before the Thrall came. Stories of cities with tall towers and gardens that grew real food. Stories of children who played in the sunlight instead of sorting toxic rocks in the processing plants. But those were just stories now. The Vellani had been slaves for so long that freedom itself had become a myth. Boza sat in her small room in the workers' housing block. The walls were made of cheap metal. The air smelled like chemicals. She was old now, her amber eyes growing dim, but she still kept the sacred duty her mother had given her. She was a keeper of memories. In a hidden space beneath her sleeping mat, she kept the forbidden things. Old papers, star charts, a small device that no longer worked but still held images from the time before. And the most precious thing of all, a transmission log from 8 centuries ago, when her ancestors had sent signals into the deep black of space, hoping someone would hear them. Someone had answered. The signals came from a distant arm of the galaxy. They spoke of peace, of exploration, of unity among different peoples. The Vellani had waited for these strangers to come and help them. But the Thrall came first. The Dominion of Thrall was an empire built on conquest. They were tall reptilian creatures with scales the color of dried blood and eyes like yellow fire. They came to Vellani 9 for its rare minerals. They stayed because the Vellani made excellent slaves. 4 arms meant twice the work. Peaceful nature meant easy control. 847 years. 30 generations. The Vellani had sent their hopeful signals into space and received only silence in return. The mysterious species that had promised unity never came. Hope died slowly, then completely. Kira did not believe in hope. She was young, only 23 cycles old, but she had already seen enough suffering to fill several lifetimes. She worked in the ore processing plant, where the air was so toxic the workers rarely lived past 40. Her mother had died there. Her father had been executed for stealing food. Her younger brother had been taken away to another camp when he was only 6 years old. She never saw him again. But Kira had something that most Vellani had lost. She had anger. She led a small group of rebels. They met in secret in the forgotten tunnels beneath the old mines. They had no weapons, no plan, no real hope of success. But they had each other, and they had their rage. And sometimes that was enough to keep going. Tonight, Kira was supposed to meet with her cell. But first, she needed to see Elder Boza. The old woman had sent word that she had something important to show her. Kira moved through the narrow streets of the workers' district. The Thrall overseers patrolled in their armored vehicles, watching everything. Security drones floated overhead, their red sensors scanning constantly. Getting caught out after curfew meant punishment. Getting caught meeting with known troublemakers meant death. She reached Boza's quarters without being seen. The old woman was waiting for her 4 hands trembling as she pulled Kira inside. "I do not have much time left," Boza said. Her voice was weak, but her eyes were sharp. "Before I die, I must pass the truth to someone who will remember it. Someone who will not give up." "I am not the right person," Kira said. "I do not believe in your old stories, Elder. The saviors never came." "No one is coming." "Perhaps," Boza said. She moved to her sleeping mat and pulled out the hidden objects. "But you should see what our ancestors saw. You should know what we once hoped for." She showed Kira the star charts, yellow with age. She showed her the transmission logs, filled with strange symbols. And then she showed her the image. It was faded and cracked, but Kira could still see the figure clearly. A being with 2 legs and 2 arms. Soft skin without scales or fur. Round eyes in strange colors. It stood upright like the Volani did, but it was clearly something else entirely. "What is this?" Kira whispered. "They called themselves humans," Boza said. "Our ancestors found their signals in the deep void. They were explorers, scientists, dreamers. They spoke of bringing all peoples together, of ending war, of sharing knowledge, and they abandoned us." "We do not know that," Boza said. "Space is vast. Perhaps they never received our calls for help. Perhaps they are still searching. Perhaps a loud alarm cut through the night." Both women froze. Outside, there were shouts. The sound of Thrall soldiers running. "What is happening?" Kira asked. They moved to the small window. In the distance, near the central plaza, a crowd was gathering. The Thrall were dragging prisoners toward the execution platform. Kira's blood went cold. She recognized one of the prisoners. His name was Talo. He was part of her resistance cell. "No," she breathed. She ran. Boza called after her, but Kira did not stop. She pushed through the crowds of workers who had been forced from their homes to watch. The Thrall liked public executions. They believed fear was the best tool for control. 3 Valani stood on the platform, their hands bound. Talo was in the middle. His face was bloody, and one of his arms hung at a wrong angle, but he stood straight. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. The Thrall overseer, a massive creature named Vrax, stepped forward. He wore ceremonial armor decorated with the bones of previous rebels. His voice boomed across the plaza through amplifiers. "These criminals slowed production in Mine 7, Vrax announced. "They thought they could resist the Dominion. They were wrong. Let this be a lesson to all of you. You are property. You will work. You will obey. There is no other choice." He gave the signal. The executioners raised their weapons. Kira screamed. The sound was lost in the crowd. 3 shots. 3 bodies fell. The Volani were silent. They had seen this too many times. They had no tears left. Kira stood frozen, staring at Talo's body. He had been her friend. He had believed, foolishly, that they could make a difference. Now he was dead, and nothing had changed. Nothing would ever change. She walked back to Boza's quarters in a daze. The old woman was still waiting, still holding the image of the human. "I saw what happened," Boza said softly. "I am sorry, child." Kira took the image from her hands. She looked at the strange creature with its soft skin and round eyes. For 800 years, her people had waited for these beings to save them. For 800 years, they had hoped and prayed and died waiting. "No one is coming," Kira said. Her voice was empty. "If we want to be free, we must free ourselves. And if we cannot do that, then we must die trying. That is better than living like this." Boza had no answer. What could she say? The girl was right. Hope was a luxury slaves could not afford. Kira turned to leave. She would rebuild her cell. She would find new fighters. She would resist until they killed her too. Then the sky changed. It started as a small light, high above the clouds. Then another light. Then another. The lights grew brighter, spreading across the darkness like new stars being born. Alarms began to wail across the colony. Not the execution alarm. Something different. Something the Volani had never heard before. Invasion warning. Kira ran outside. All around her, Volani were emerging from their quarters, looking up at the sky with expressions of confusion and fear. The lights were ships. Dozens of them. They were emerging from hyperspace, tearing holes in the fabric of reality itself. They were huge, dark, and covered with weapons. And they were heading directly for Veloth 9. Boza appeared beside Kira, moving faster than a woman her age should be able to move. Her amber eyes were fixed on the sky, and tears were streaming down her gray cheeks. "What is it?" Kira demanded. "Who are they? More enemies?" Boza clutched the old image to her chest. Her voice was barely a whisper, filled with an emotion that had been dead for centuries. "The Starfarers," she said. "After all this time." They came. Above them, the human warships darkened the sky. Admiral Park Do-hyun stood on the bridge of the UEC Indomitable, watching the planet grow larger on the main screen. Velith 9, a gray world covered in mining scars and industrial smoke. Even from orbit, he could see the ugliness of what had been done to it. He was 57 years old. His hair had gone white at the temples, and his face carried the lines of decades spent in deep space. He had fought pirates, rebels, and alien raiders. He had seen colonies burned and populations scattered. He had buried friends and enemies alike. But this was different. This mission was not about territory or resources. This was about something much older. 32 ships in position, Admiral, reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Han Yuna. She was young, barely 30, with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. She came from a military family and had graduated at the top of her class. She was also, Park knew, carrying a deep anger that she kept carefully controlled. "What do we know about the surface?" Park asked. Yuna pulled up the sensor data. Population approximately 2 million. The native species is called the Volani. 4 arms, gray skin, humanoid structure. They have been under dominion of Threll occupation for... She paused, checking the data twice. 847 years, sir. The bridge went quiet. 8 centuries. 30 generations of slavery. And the Threll presence? 1 orbital station with military capability. Ground forces estimated at 50,000. They have air support and armored units, but nothing that matches our technology level. Sir, they are at least 200 years behind us in weapons development. Park nodded slowly. The United Earth Coalition had spent centuries developing in isolation, protected by the vast distances of space. While empires like the Threll had built their power on conquest and slave labor, humanity had built theirs on science and cooperation. The result was a technological gap that the Threll could not imagine. Communications. Have they noticed us? Park asked. They are hailing us now, sir. The orbital station is demanding identification. Put them through. The main screen flickered and a Threll face appeared. Reptilian features. Yellow eyes. Scales the color of rust. The creature wore the uniform of a high-ranking officer, decorated with what appeared to be bone fragments. Unknown vessels, this is Overseer Vrax of the Dominion of Threll. You have entered claimed territory. Identify yourselves and state your purpose, or you will be destroyed. Park remained calm. He had dealt with tyrants before. They were always the same, drunk on their own power, unable to imagine a universe where they were not the strongest. Overseer Vrax, I am Admiral Park Do-hyun of the United Earth Coalition. We are here on a humanitarian mission. Vrax laughed. The sound was harsh, like stones scraping together. Humanitarian? There is no humanity here, strange creature. Only Threll and their property. What do you want? I want to ask you a question, Park said. Are there slaves on the planet below? The question seemed to confuse Vrax. He tilted his massive head, studying the human on his screen. Of course there are slaves. The Volani are property of the Dominion. They have been for centuries. What concern is that of yours? It is very much my concern, Park said quietly. Listen carefully, little creature, Vrax growled. I do not know where you come from or what you think you are doing here, but the Dominion controls 47 worlds. We have crushed species far more impressive than whatever you are. Turn your ships around and leave, or I will add your bones to my collection." Park looked at the screen for a long moment. Behind him, his crew waited in tense silence. Yuna's hand rested on her console, ready to execute the tactical plan they had prepared. "This conversation is over," Park said. He gave a small nod. Yuna's fingers flew across her console. The Thrall orbital station went dark. Every light, every system, every weapon simply stopped working. Human electronic warfare technology had been perfected over centuries of dealing with hostile AI and rogue systems. Against Thrall computers, it was like using a sword against a child's toy. On the screen, Vrax's expression changed from arrogance to confusion to fear in the span of 3 seconds. "What? What did you do?" "Our weapons are offline." "Our shields. I told you," Park said. "This conversation is over." He cut the transmission. "All ships," he announced on the fleet channel. "Begin Operation Daybreak. Tactical, coordinate strikes on military targets only. I want 0 civilian casualties. We are here to liberate, not destroy." Yuna nodded. Her anger, carefully controlled for so long, now had a purpose. Targeting military installations, communications hubs, and command centers. Fighters are launching now. The human fleet moved with terrible precision. Small attack craft screamed down through the atmosphere, their weapon systems targeting Thrall positions with perfect accuracy. Ground batteries that tried to fire back were destroyed before they could complete a single shot. Armored vehicles were disabled by electromagnetic pulses. Command bunkers were breached by precision missiles. The Thrall had never faced anything like this. Their empire had been built on overwhelming force and brutality. They conquered species that were weaker than them and avoided those that were stronger. They had no experience fighting an enemy that was both stronger and smarter. In 17 minutes, the orbital station was disabled. In 40 minutes, Thrall air superiority was eliminated. In 3 hours, every military installation on Velith 9 was either destroyed or captured. The Vallani watched from their labor camps and mining complexes. They saw the Thrall ships falling from the sky in flames. They saw their masters running in panic. They saw the strange vessels with markings they did not recognize taking control of their world. And they did not know whether to feel hope or terror. Admiral Park knew what they must be thinking. After centuries of slavery, the arrival of new aliens might seem like nothing more than a change of masters. He needed to reach them, to explain, to offer something that had been denied to them for too long. "Communications," he said. "Open a channel to the planet's surface. All frequencies. And translate this into the Vallani trade language." "Sir, our linguistic database has reconstructed ancient Vallani from their old transmissions, but it may not be perfect. It does not need to be perfect. It needs to be understood." Park stood straight, facing the camera that would broadcast his image to a world of slaves. He thought about what to say. He thought about 800 years of suffering. He thought about children born into chains who grew old and died without ever seeing the sun as free beings. "People of Velith," he began. His voice was calm, but carried across the planet like thunder. "My name is Park Doyen. I come from a world called Earth, very far from here. Many centuries ago, your ancestors sent signals into the darkness of space. They called for help. They asked if anyone was listening." He paused, letting the words reach every corner of the planet. "We heard you. We are sorry it took so long. The universe is vast, and we did not find your calls until recently. But we found them, and we came." On the surface, Kira stood frozen in the middle of the workers' district. All around her, Vallani were emerging from their shelters, looking at the screens that had been used for Thrall propaganda. Now those screens showed a strange face. soft skin, round eyes. A creature from the ancient stories. "We are not here to conquer you," the human continued. "We are not here to replace one master with another. We are here because no sentient being should live in chains. We are here because your suffering matters. We are here because, long ago, we made a promise to ourselves. We would never look away when others needed help." Elder Boza appeared beside Kira. The old woman was weeping openly, her 4 hands clasped together in prayer. "The Thrall military has been defeated," Park said. "Their leaders are being captured. But our work is not finished. We have medical teams ready to help your sick and injured. We have food and supplies for those who need them. And we have soldiers who will protect you while we remove the Thrall from your world." His voice softened. "I know you have no reason to trust us. I know you have waited for help for so long that hope itself must seem like a cruel joke. I cannot erase 800 years of suffering with words. All I can do is show you through our actions that we mean what we say." He took a breath. "Hold on, we are coming." The transmission ended. Across Veloth 9, 2 million Valani stood in silence. They looked at each other. They looked at the sky, where human ships moved like guardian spirits. They looked at the Thrall overseers who had thrown down their weapons and were surrendering in droves. Kira felt something strange in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it. She had not felt it since she was a small child, before her father was killed, before her brother was taken. It was hope. Beside her, Boza whispered the old words from the ancient transmissions. The words the humans had sent across the galaxy so long ago. Unity, exploration, peace among all peoples. The Starfarers had finally come. The drop pods fell like meteors through the atmosphere of Veloth 9. Inside each one, human soldiers sat in tense silence, checking their weapons and reviewing their mission parameters. They had trained for this. They had prepared for this. But nothing could truly prepare a person for what they were about to see. Sergeant First Class Cho Minho was the first to hit the ground near Labor Camp 7. He was 41 years old, a career soldier with scars on his face and medals in his file. He had fought in 3 wars and countless smaller engagements. He had seen terrible things. He thought he was ready for anything. He was wrong. The camp gates were already open when his squad arrived. The Thrall guards had fled or surrendered when the orbital bombardment began. What remained was a sprawling complex of metal buildings, toxic processing plants, and endless rows of cramped housing units. And the people. They came out slowly at first, blinking in the light of the morning sun. Gray-skinned beings with 4 arms and golden eyes, wearing torn clothing that was more rag than fabric. They were thin, so thin that Minho could count their ribs even through their clothes. Their movements were slow and careful, like animals that had been beaten too many times to trust anything. "Hold positions," Minho ordered his squad through his helmet cum. "Weapons down. We are not here as conquerors. Move slowly, smile if you can, and for God's sake, do not point your guns at anyone." His soldiers obeyed. They spread out through the camp, their weapons lowered, their hands visible. Medics began setting up aid stations. Engineers started checking the water supply and power systems. Supply officers began distributing food and medicine. Private Shin Yunji was one of the medics. She was 23 years old, fresh out of training, on her first real deployment. She had joined the military because she wanted to help people. She had imagined treating wounded soldiers on battlefields, saving lives under fire, being a hero. She had not imagined this. The first patient they brought to her was a child. A little Velani girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old by human standards. Her small body was covered in chemical burns. Her 4 hands were raw and bleeding. One of her eyes was clouded over from some kind of infection. Yunji felt her throat tighten. What happened to her? The adult Vellani, who had carried the child and spoke in broken common tongue, learned from Threll broadcasts. She works in sorting plant. All children work there. Rocks have poison in them. Burns the skin. Burns the eyes. How long has she been working there? Since she could walk. Yoonji had to look away for a moment. She had to breathe. She had to remind herself that she was a professional, that she had a job to do, that falling apart would not help anyone. "Okay," she said, her voice steady despite everything. "Okay, let us help her." She worked for hours. The child was only the first. There were hundreds more, an endless stream of broken bodies and damaged souls. Radiation poisoning, malnutrition, untreated infections, injuries from beatings and accidents. Some of them were so far gone that all Yoonji could do was make them comfortable. But others she could save. And she saved them, one by one, patient by patient, refusing to stop even when her hands shook and her eyes burned. Across the camp, Sergeant Minho had his own struggles. He had found the administrative building where Thrall records were stored. He was looking for information on prisoners, on deaths, on where people had been sent. And what he found made him sick. 800 years of records. 800 years of names and numbers. How many had been born? How many had died? How many had been executed for crimes like insufficient productivity or displaying rebellious attitude? How many children had been separated from their families and shipped to other camps? Minho was a father. He had a daughter back on Earth, 13 years old, who liked to paint pictures and play music. He tried not to think about what it would be like to have her taken away, to never know what happened to her, to spend the rest of his life wondering. He stepped outside the building and stood in the gray light of Veloth 9's sun. He needed a moment. Just one moment to be human, to feel the horror of what had been done here. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "You are one of the Starfarers." He turned. A young Vellani woman was standing a few meters away, watching him with sharp amber eyes. She was thin like the others, but she held herself differently. There was strength in her posture, defiance. "My name is Cho Minho," he said. "I am a soldier from Earth. My name is Kira. I was part of the resistance here. What little resistance we could manage." She studied him, as if trying to understand something. "Why did you come?" It was a simple question, but it carried the weight of 8 centuries. "Because we found your ancestors' signals," Minho said. "Because we learned what was happening here. Because—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Because someone had to. Many peoples have passed through this sector. Traders, explorers. They all saw what was happening. None of them stopped to help." Minho nodded. He understood her suspicion. "I cannot speak for them. I can only speak for us. For Earth, we have made mistakes in our history. Terrible mistakes. We have been the slavers and the conquerors. We have been the ones who looked away." He met her eyes directly. "We learned better. It took us a long time, and it cost us more than I can describe. But we learned that no one is truly free until everyone is free. We learned that looking away from evil makes you part of it." He gestured at the camp around them. "So we do not look away anymore." Kira was silent for a long moment. Then she asked another question. "What will you do with the Threll soldiers who surrendered?" "We will hold them as prisoners. They will face justice for what they have done." "Justice?" Kira's voice was bitter. "They killed my friend yesterday. They executed him in the public square for slowing production. They have killed thousands like him. Millions over the centuries. What justice can possibly answer for that?" Minho had no easy answer. There was no easy answer. "I do not know," he admitted. "I know it will never be enough. Nothing can bring back the dead. Nothing can erase what was done. But executing prisoners who have surrendered would make us no better than them. And we need to be better. We have to be. Even after everything they did? Especially after everything they did. He took a breath. When I was young, there was a war on my homeworld. A terrible war. My family was caught in the middle of it. I lost my mother, my brothers. I wanted revenge. I wanted to make them pay. He looked at his hands, remembering. Someone stopped me. An old soldier who had seen more wars than I could imagine. He told me something I have never forgotten. He said, "The moment you become the monster to fight the monster, you have already lost." I did not understand it then. I understand it now. Kira said nothing, but something in her expression shifted, just slightly. "Come with me," Minho said. "Help us. You know this place, these people. We need guides. We need translators. We need people who can help us understand what happened here and what needs to be done. You want my help? I am asking for it. The choice is yours. It has always been yours. That is what freedom means." For the first time in her life, Kira was being given a choice. A real choice. Not between different kinds of suffering, but between hiding and stepping forward. She stepped forward. By the end of the first day, the camps had been opened. The processing plants had been shut down. Medical teams were treating the wounded. Engineers were purifying water and preparing food. And for the first time in 8 centuries, the Vallani were sleeping without guards watching over them. That night, Admiral Park came down to the surface. He walked through the camps, speaking with survivors, listening to their stories. He did not make speeches or grand promises. He simply listened. Near the end of his tour, he met Elder Boza. She was very old, and the day had exhausted her, but she insisted on seeing the human commander. Park knelt before her, bringing his eyes to her level. It was a gesture of respect, one that the Thrall had never shown. "Elder," he said, "I am honored to meet you." Boza reached out with one of her 4 hands and touched his face. Her fingers were gentle, tracing the unfamiliar features. "The Starfurs," she whispered. "You really came. After all this time." "I am sorry we were late," Park said. "I am sorry we could not come sooner." "If we had known, you came," Boza said. "That is what matters. You came." She closed her eyes, and for the first time in her long life, she slept without fear. Above them, the human warships kept watch over Veloth 9, guarding a world that was finally, impossibly, beginning to hope. 300 warships gathered in the darkness between stars. They were the pride of the Dominion of Thro, assembled from 47 conquered worlds. Dreadnoughts bristling with weapons. Carriers filled with fighters. Troop transports loaded with soldiers, eager for blood. At the center of the fleet sat the command ship, a massive vessel called the Fist of Conquest. It was 3 kilometers long, armored with the strongest materials the Dominion could produce, armed with enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. It had never been defeated in battle. It had never even been damaged. On the bridge of this terrible ship stood Supreme Warlord Thrax. He was ancient by Thrall standards, nearly 200 years old. His scales had darkened to the color of old blood. His eyes burned with a fire that had consumed countless worlds. He had led the Dominion's armies for over a century, and in all that time, he had never known defeat. He would not know it today. "Show me the recordings again," he commanded. His officers obeyed. The main screen displayed the images captured from Veloth 9 before communications were lost. Strange ships emerging from hyperspace. The orbital station going dark. Thrall forces being systematically destroyed with impossible precision. Thrax watched without expression. He had studied war his entire life. He understood tactics and strategy better than anyone in the Dominion. And what he saw in these recordings disturbed him. It was not the technology, though that was impressive. It was not the coordination, though that was flawless. It was the restraint. The unknown enemy had defeated the Veloth 9 garrison without destroying a single civilian structure. They had disabled rather than killed whenever possible. They had shown mercy to those who surrendered. In Thrax's experience, such restraint meant one of two things. Either these creatures were weak, unable to do what was necessary to win, or they were so confident in their strength that they could afford to be gentle. He suspected it was the second. "What do we know about them?" he asked. "Very little, Supreme Warlord. They call themselves humans. They come from a world called Earth, in a distant arm of the galaxy. They appear to be a young species, but their technology is..." The officer hesitated. "Advanced. How advanced?" "Based on our analysis, at least 2 centuries beyond our own capabilities. Perhaps more." Silence fell over the bridge. 2 centuries. In military terms, that was an eternity. It meant the humans could hit them from distances they could not return fire. It meant human shields could withstand weapons that their shields could not block. It meant they were walking into a slaughter. But Thrax had not conquered 47 worlds by retreating from challenges. He had conquered them by overwhelming force, by brutality, by making examples of those who resisted. The universe respected strength. It feared cruelty. These humans would learn. "Set course for Veloth 9, he ordered. "All ships. Maximum speed." On Veloth 9, Admiral Park received the news with grim acceptance. His intelligence officers had been tracking Thrall communications, waiting for the inevitable response. Now it was coming. 300 ships, sir," Lieutenant Commander Han Yuna reported. "They will arrive in approximately 18 hours. Park stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, staring at the tactical display. 32 human ships against 300 enemy vessels. The math was not good. "Can we call for reinforcements?" "The nearest coalition fleet is 6 weeks away, sir. Even if they left immediately, they would not arrive in time." "What about retreating?" "We could evacuate key personnel, withdraw to coalition space. If we leave, the Thrall will retake Veloth 9 within hours. They will punish the Valani for cooperating with us." Yuna's voice was steady, but her eyes were hard. "But based on historical precedent, they will execute approximately 20% of the population as an example. That is 400,000 people, sir." Park closed his eyes. He had known this might happen. He had hoped it would not, but he had known. "Then we stay." "Sir, with respect, the odds." "I am aware of the odds, Commander." He turned to face her. "I am also aware that we made a promise to these people. We told them we came to help. We told them they could trust us. If we run now, we prove that we are no different from everyone else who passed through this sector and looked away." He moved to the communications console. "All ships, this is Admiral Park. By now you know that a Thrall fleet is approaching. 300 warships against our 32. Command is offering no orders to retreat. This is because I am not ordering a retreat." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We came here to free people who had been enslaved for 8 centuries. We told them we would not abandon them. I intend to keep that promise. I am asking each of you to stay and fight. If any ship wishes to withdraw, I will not stop them. There will be no punishment, no dishonor. But I believe we did not come this far to run away." He waited. The fleet channels remained silent. Not a single ship requested permission to leave. "Very well. Begin defensive preparations. If the Dominion wants Veloth 9, they will have to take it from us." On the surface, the news spread quickly. The Valani, so recently freed, now faced the prospect of their masters returning with overwhelming force. Panic began to set in. Some wanted to flee into the wilderness. Others wanted to surrender immediately, hoping for mercy. Kira would not accept either option. She found Sergeant Minho coordinating the evacuation of non-combatants. Transport ships were loading Vallani refugees, preparing to take them to safety in case the battle went badly. "I want to fight," she said. Minho looked at her. "You have no training, no weapons experience. I have been fighting the Thrall my entire life. I know their tactics, their weaknesses. I know the terrain of this world better than any of your soldiers. This will not be a ground battle. This will be decided in space, and if you lose, they will come down here and they will make us pay for resisting. I would rather die fighting than live through what comes after." Minho studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Come with me. We will find something useful for you to do." Ambassador Yoon Jae-soo had been sent with the fleet as a diplomatic observer. She had never expected to be coordinating the largest evacuation operation in human history. But here she was, standing in a makeshift command center, managing the flow of refugees on the transport ships. "We are at maximum capacity," one of the transport captains reported. "I cannot fit any more passengers." Jisoo looked at the crowd still waiting. Families with children, elderly who could barely walk, young people who had never known anything but slavery. "Then stand closer together," she said. "Remove non-essential cargo. Strip out crew comfort items. I do not care how uncomfortable it is. No one stays behind." The captain hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am." They worked through the night, loading ship after ship. But there were too many Vallani and not enough transports. For every 100 they saved, thousands more waited. As dawn broke over Veloth 9, the Thrall fleet arrived. They emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, 300 ships spreading across the sky like a wall of death. The Fist of Conquest took position at the center, its weapons already charging. Warlord Thrax opened a communication channel that broadcast across all frequencies. His voice reached every human ship, every Vallani refugee, every corner of the planet below. "Attention, invaders. I am Supreme Warlord Thrax of the Dominion of Thrall. You have committed an act of war against our empire. You have stolen our property. You have killed our soldiers. I offer you one chance to survive." He paused for effect. "Surrender your weapons. Return our slaves. Submit yourselves to public execution. In exchange, I will only kill half of the Vallani population. This is generous. Do not test my patience." On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Park listened to the ultimatum. His officers waited for his response. Behind him, the tactical display showed the enemy fleet, vast and terrible, ready to destroy them. Park activated his own broadcast. His voice went out across all frequencies, not just to the Thrall, but to the wider galaxy. To every ship, every station, every world that was listening. "This is Admiral Park Do-yin of the United Earth Coalition. I have heard your terms. Here is my response." He stood straight, his voice calm and clear. "Every sentient being has the right to freedom. Every child deserves to grow up without chains. You built your empire on suffering and called it strength. You enslaved millions and called it order. Today, that begins to end." He looked at the enemy fleet on his screen. "You asked me to surrender people who trusted us to protect them. You asked me to betray everything we believe in. You asked me to be like you." His voice hardened. "The answer is no. We will not surrender. We will not retreat. We will not betray the people who called to us across the darkness of space for 800 years." He leaned forward. "Come and take them if you can." Across the galaxy, countless species heard those words. Races that had been conquered by the Thrall. Peoples who had watched the Dominion grow and spread, too afraid to resist. Civilizations that have given up hope of anyone ever standing against the tyrants, They heard a human admiral, outnumbered 10-1, refuse to abandon those he had sworn to protect. And something began to change. Warlord Thrax cut the communication with a snarl. All ships. Attack formation. Destroy them all. The Battle of Velith 9 had begun. The void above Velith 9 became a sea of fire. 300 Thrall warships surged forward, their weapons blazing. 32 human vessels stood in their path, shields flaring under the assault. Admiral Park watched the tactical display as the battle unfolded. His fleet was better than the enemy in every technical measure. Their shields were stronger. Their weapons hit harder and reached farther. Their targeting systems were more accurate. But numbers still mattered. For every Thrall ship they destroyed, 10 more took its place. For every wave they repelled, another came behind it. Concentrate fire on their carriers, Park ordered. Take out their fighter support? The human fleet adjusted formation, focusing their combined firepower on the massive carrier vessels that were launching swarms of smaller craft. One carrier erupted in flames. Then another. But the Thrall kept coming. On the destroyer UEC Defiance, Captain Lee Ha-jun fought his ship with desperate skill. He was 39 years old, with a wife and daughter waiting for him back on Earth. He had promised his little girl that he would come home safely. He was beginning to think he might not be able to keep that promise. Hull breach on Deck 7, his first officer reported. Shields at 30%. We have lost our primary weapons array. Ha-jun looked at the tactical display. His ship was crippled. He could retreat, fall back behind the other vessels, try to limp away from the battle. No one would blame him. He had done more than his share. But if he retreated, the ships behind him would be exposed. The medical transports carrying wounded Vellani refugees would be vulnerable. Everything they had fought for would be at risk. He made his decision. Navigation set a collision course for the Thrall flagship. All power to engines. His bridge crew stared at him. They understood what he was asking. Sir, his first officer said quietly. Are you certain? Get to the escape pods, Ha-jun said. All of you. That is an order. We are not leaving you, Captain. Ha-jun looked at his crew. These men and women had served with him for years. They had become family, and now they were choosing to die with him. Then let us make it count. The Defiance accelerated toward the Fist of Conquest. Thrall gunners tried to stop it, but the destroyer was moving too fast, weaving through their fire. Warlord Thrax saw the human ship coming and realized too late what was happening. All batteries, target that vessel. Stop it, but they could not stop it. Captain Ha-jun opened the transmission in the final seconds. His voice was calm. Tell my daughter I kept my promise. I stood for something. The Defiance struck the Fist of Conquest's main hangar bay at full speed. The explosion tore through the flagship's midsection, destroying its fighter capacity and crippling its primary weapon systems. Warlord Thrax was thrown from his command chair as the deck buckled beneath him. The Thrall fleet hesitated. Their command ship was burning. Their supreme warlord was out of contact. For the first time in living memory, they did not know what to do. And then the sky changed again. New signatures appeared on every sensor screen. Ships emerging from hyperspace. Not human ships. Different configurations. Different designs. Vessels that Park's officers did not recognize. Admiral, we have incoming contacts. Multiple species. They are broadcasting support signals. Park stared at the display. Ships from 17 different civilizations were arriving over Velith 9. Species that the Thrall had conquered, threatened, or intimidated for centuries. The Vorna, whose homeworld had been stripped of resources 50 years ago. The Keleth, whose population had been decimated in a punitive campaign. The Marisi, who had lived in fear of invasion for generations. They had been watching. They had seen humans stand and fight for strangers. They had seen a small fleet refuse to abandon those it had sworn to protect. And they had decided to join. A transmission came through on all frequencies. The voice was not human, but the message was clear. Human fleet, this is the Combined Liberation Armada. We stand with you. No more fear. No more silence. Today we fight together. Park felt something loosen in his chest. He had been prepared to die. He had been prepared to lose. But now, impossibly, they had a chance. All ships, he ordered. Coordinate with our new allies. Let us finish this. The combined fleet tore into the Thrall formation. What had been an overwhelming advantage became a trap. Thrall ships tried to retreat, but they were surrounded. Vessels that had terrorized dozens of worlds now burned in the void. On the surface of Veloth 9, Kira watched the battle through atmospheric distortions. She could see the flashes of explosions, the trails of dying ships. She did not know who was winning, but she knew she could not just watch. There is a Thrall command bunker near the old mine complex, she told Sergeant Minho. If their ground forces have any leadership left, they will be coordinating from there. Minho nodded. Show us. They moved through the industrial wasteland, a combined team of human soldiers and Vellani resistance fighters. Kira led them through passages that only someone born on this world would know. She had spent her whole life learning how to hide from the Thrall. Now she was using that knowledge to hunt them. The bunker was defended, but not well. The Thrall had never expected a ground assault. They had never imagined their slaves fighting back. Minho's team breached the outer defenses. Kira moved beside them, carrying a human rifle that felt strange in her 4 hands, but fired true enough. She had never killed anyone before. Today she killed 3 Thrall soldiers who tried to stop them. She did not feel guilty. She felt free. They found the bunker's command center. Inside, a handful of Thrall officers were trying to coordinate the remaining ground forces. When the door blew open, they reached for their weapons. Drop them, Minho ordered. Now, most of the officers surrendered. But one of them, a colonel who had overseen the labor camps for decades, raised his pistol toward Kira. She shot him before he could fire. He fell, his yellow eyes wide with disbelief. A slave had killed him. It was, she imagined, the most shocking moment of his life. Above them, the battle was ending. The Thrall fleet, what remained of it, was retreating. Warlord Thrax, his flagship crippled, was forced to surrender when boarding parties from the combined fleet cut their way to his bridge. Minho and Kira were there when they brought him out. The supreme warlord of the Dominion, conqueror of 47 worlds, was in chains. His scales were scorched, his ceremonial armor torn. He looked at the humans and aliens surrounding him with hatred that would never fade. But hatred did not matter anymore. He had lost. 3 days later, a ceremony was held in the central plaza of the main Vellani city. The same plaza where Kira had watched her friend Talo be executed. The same stones that had been stained with the blood of countless innocents. Representatives from 18 species gathered. Humans, Vellani, Vorna, Kauth, Marisi, and many others. They came to witness the signing of the Charter of Free Worlds, a document that would bind them together against tyranny. Admiral Park stood before the assembly. He had not slept in days, and his uniform was wrinkled, but his voice was strong. We did not come to Veloth because we wanted an empire. We came because 8 centuries ago, someone in the dark sent out a signal hoping for help. It took us too long to answer, but we answered. That is what humans do. We answer. He stepped back, and Elder Boza took his place. She moved slowly, supported by Kira on one side and a human medic on the other. She was very old, and the past days had exhausted her. But she had insisted on speaking. "For centuries," she began, her voice carrying across the silent crowd, "my people asked the stars for a savior. We prayed to gods we no longer believed in. We sent signals into the void, hoping someone would hear. No one came. Generation after generation, no one came." She looked at the humans, at the other species who had joined them. "And then, when we had given up hope, we learned the truth. Saviors do not come from the stars. They come from those who refuse to look away from suffering. Humanity did not save us because they were gods. They saved us because they remembered what it meant to be mortal and chose to be good anyway." She smiled, and for a moment she looked young again. "They came late. They came anyway. They stayed." The crowd was silent. Then, slowly, the applause began. It built and built, spreading through the plaza, through the city, across the planet. The sound of people who had been silenced for 800 years, finally finding their voice. 10 years later, Veloth 9 was a thriving world. The mines were still operating, but now the workers were paid, protected, and free to leave whenever they wished. Cities were growing. Children were going to schools. Art and music, forbidden for centuries, flourished again. Kira had become ambassador to Earth. She spent her time traveling between worlds, building connections, ensuring that what happened to her people would never happen again. In the central plaza, a memorial stood where the execution platform had once been. It was a simple statue, a human soldier kneeling beside a Vellani child, their hands clasped together. At the base, an inscription was carved in both languages. "They came late. They came anyway. They stayed." Across the galaxy, the story spread. Other enslaved peoples began to hope. Other tyrants began to fear. The universe had changed, because now everyone knew, when someone calls for help in the darkness, humanity answers. And they never look away.